For most civilizations in the galaxy, the name Dominion meant the same thing: inevitable conquest. For 3,000 star systems, the pattern had always been identical. A Dominion fleet would appear at the edge of a system. Diplomats would offer terms of peaceful integration. If the offer was refused, the fleets would advance. Planets fell within days. Some worlds resisted for weeks. A few proud civilizations managed months. None lasted longer. The Dominion did not simply win wars, it perfected them. Their commanders had centuries of strategic knowledge. Their soldiers were engineered for combat superiority. Their fleets were designed for overwhelming force. Against such power, resistance was pointless, except on one strange world: Earth. When the Dominion first discovered the human homeworld, their analysts predicted an easy victory. Humanity had only recently begun exploring nearby star systems. Their fleets were small. Their technology seemed ordinary compared to Dominion standards. Most council members believed Earth would surrender the moment Dominion ships appeared. But Earth did not surrender. In fact, the humans barely reacted. Diplomatic envoys were sent first. They were welcomed politely, and then ignored. Trade pressure followed. Human merchants simply shifted their markets elsewhere. Military intimidation came next, with several Dominion battle groups moving into nearby systems. Still, humanity refused to bend. The Dominion Council initially assumed the humans were foolish. But then the disappearances began. The first missing fleet was small, just a reconnaissance group assigned to map human defenses. Their ships entered the outer edges of human space and transmitted routine reports for several hours. Then the signal ended. No distress call. No battle report. No wreckage. Just silence. At first, the Dominion blamed mechanical failure. Space was dangerous, after all. But when a second reconnaissance fleet vanished in the exact same region, concern began spreading through military command. Then a third fleet disappeared. And a fourth. Within 10 years, 20 Dominion fleets had entered human-controlled territory. None had ever returned. What made the situation more unsettling was the lack of evidence. No debris fields. No destroyed ships. No captured signals. It was as if the fleets had simply been erased. The Dominion Chancellor stood in the center of the High Council chamber as thousands of alien delegates watched the latest report. A holographic star map glowed above the floor. 20 small red lights marked the locations where fleets had vanished, each one inside human territory. The Chancellor folded his hands behind his back. "Humans claim to possess no superweapons," he said calmly. "Yet our ships vanish whenever they cross their borders." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some council members whispered about hidden technologies. Others suggested secret alliances with unknown species. The Chancellor raised a hand, silencing them. "No species hides such power forever," he continued. "So we will force the truth into the light." He turned toward the Dominion Military Command seated along the chamber wall. "The next assault will not be fleets." Confused murmurs spread again. The Chancellor's voice hardened. "We will send soldiers. Not ordinary troops. Not standard invasion forces." He meant the Dominion's elite. Across the Empire, a summons was transmitted to the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever produced. Veterans who had conquered worlds. Genetic supersoldiers engineered for perfect combat performance. Legendary commanders whose victories were studied in military academies. 5,000 of the most dangerous fighters in known space. Their mission would be simple: land on Earth, find whatever weapon humanity was hiding, and destroy it. As the orders spread across Dominion territory, a young officer quietly asked his superior a question. Why send soldiers? Why not simply destroy Earth from orbit? The older general looked at the glowing image of the blue planet. Because something down there is stopping fleets, he said. And if humanity has discovered a new form of warfare. His voice lowered. We need to understand it before we face it again. The Dominion strike fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system in perfect formation. 30 sleek warships drifted silently beyond the orbit of Pluto, their hulls glowing faintly as hyperspace engines cooled. Inside them were the finest soldiers the Dominion had ever produced, 5,000 elite warriors drawn from 100 conquered civilizations. For most of them, this mission was supposed to be simple: land on Earth, destroy whatever hidden defense humanity was using, return with answers. The fleet commander, General Varex, studied the planet through a holographic display. Earth rotated peacefully beneath scattered clouds and blue oceans. No massive orbital cannons. No giant battle stations. No defensive armadas. Only a few modest satellites and scattered human patrol ships. Varex frowned. "Is this correct?" he asked the sensor officer. "Yes, General," the officer replied. "Orbital defenses are minimal. No large weapons platforms detected." The general leaned closer to the projection. That made no sense. 20 Dominion fleets had vanished somewhere inside human territory. If Earth truly possessed a weapon capable of destroying fleets, it should be visible. But the planet looked ordinary. A second officer spoke carefully. "We are detecting thousands of installations across the surface." Varex turned. "Military bases?" The officer hesitated. "Not exactly." The hologram shifted, highlighting hundreds of locations scattered across continents. Facilities. Large complexes. Massive enclosed structures. Training grounds. Simulation arenas. Combat ranges. Varex stared at the display. "Those are training centers." "Yes, General." Several Dominion officers began laughing quietly. "Humans are still preparing for war they cannot win," one of them joked. Varex finally waved a hand dismissively. "Enough analysis. Begin deployment." Moments later, drop ships launched from the Dominion fleet. Hundreds of armored craft tore through Earth's atmosphere, descending toward landing zones across the planet. The invasion had begun. The first Dominion soldiers landed in a wide valley surrounded by dense forests. Heavy armor sealed around their bodies. Energy rifles powered up. Tactical sensors activated. They expected alarms, panic, military resistance. Instead, they found humans already waiting. A group of about 30 soldiers stood calmly in the open field near the landing zone. No defensive fortifications. No heavy weapons. Just simple combat gear and relaxed posture. General Varex stepped down from his transport and approached them. He activated the Universal Translator. "Surrender your world," he announced. One of the humans stepped forward. He looked young compared to most Dominion officers, wearing a simple uniform marked Earth Defense Command. He studied the alien soldiers for a moment. Then he checked something on a small wrist device. "You're early," the human said. Varex narrowed his eyes. "Early." The human nodded casually. "We usually run this scenario next week." A ripple of confusion spread through the Dominion soldiers. Scenario? Varex's voice hardened. You misunderstand. This is an invasion. The human officer shrugged slightly. We know. Varex gestured toward the surrounding soldiers. You stand no chance against this force. The human glanced around calmly, counting the Dominion troops. Then he tapped his wrist console. Across the planet, something quietly activated. Deep underground bunkers, orbital stations, hidden military installations. Thousands of human soldiers received the same message at the exact same moment. Live combat exercise initiated. The Dominion commander stared at the human. Exercise. The human smiled faintly. You wanted to understand our defenses. He stepped aside and gestured toward the forest behind him. Well, welcome to training. At first, the Dominion soldiers advanced with complete confidence. Their armor was stronger than anything humans possessed. Their reflexes were faster. Many of them had spent entire lifetimes fighting wars across dozens of planets. Against most species, a single Dominion elite soldier could dominate an entire battlefield. 5,000 of them landing across Earth should have been unstoppable. General Varex gave the order. Advance. Secure the surrounding territory. Hundreds of soldiers moved forward immediately, spreading through forests, cities, and mountain ranges surrounding the landing zones. The first engagements happened quickly. In the forest near the valley, a Dominion squad of 12 warriors entered the tree line, sensors scanning for hostile movement. They detected nothing. No weapons. No soldiers. The jungle appeared empty. Then one of them vanished. Not killed. Not wounded. Simply gone. The remaining soldiers spun around, weapons raised. Contact lost, one of them shouted. Before anyone could react, another soldier disappeared into the dense foliage. No gunfire. No energy signatures. Just sudden silence. Form defensive positions, the squad leader barked. But it was already too late. Within seconds, the entire squad was gone. Across the planet, similar reports began flooding Dominion command channels. Urban assault teams entered human cities only to discover the streets completely empty. Then power grids failed. Communication signals jammed. Entire squads vanished inside buildings without a trace. Mountain units attempting to secure elevated positions reported shadows moving faster than their scanners could track. Desert forces were ambushed by attackers who seemed to appear from nowhere. Each time the pattern was the same. Dominion soldiers would advance. Then they would disappear. No explosions. No large-scale battles. Just quiet, surgical removals. General Varex stood inside the command dropship listening to the reports. At first he believed they were exaggerated. Then the casualty numbers started rising. 5 squads lost. Then 10. Then 30. And still no confirmed human casualties. Varex slammed a fist against the tactical console. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. His tactical officer looked pale. "Our scanners show small groups of human soldiers operating independently." "How many?" The officer hesitated. "Unknown." Another transmission burst through the command channel. "Unit Delta reporting. We're under attack." Gunfire echoed briefly through the signal. Then silence. Varex turned toward the sensor display. Human forces were moving constantly. Small teams shifting through forests. Units emerging from underground tunnels. Snipers appearing on rooftops and disappearing seconds later. But what terrified Dominion Command most was the speed. Humans seemed to know exactly where every Dominion squad would move before they arrived. Every path the Dominion soldiers took was already waiting for them. Every advance led directly into an ambush. A captured Dominion warrior was eventually brought before a human squad leader. The alien looked furious. "You fight like cowards," he growled. The human soldier tilted his head slightly. "No," he replied calmly. "We fight like professionals." The Dominion warrior spat. "You knew our movements before we made them." The human shrugged. "Of course." He gestured toward the surrounding training facility, visible in the distance. "We've been practicing your invasion for 30 years. By the time 6 hours had passed, nearly half the Dominion elite force had vanished from the battlefield, and the rest were beginning to understand something horrifying. They weren't fighting an army. They were fighting a species that had already fought this war thousands of times. 6 hours after the Dominion invasion began, the battlefield looked nothing like General Varex had expected. It was quiet. Too quiet. The Dominion command ship hovered above a remote mountain range as tactical officers worked frantically at their consoles. The original invasion force had been deployed across dozens of locations around Earth. Now, almost half of them were gone. Not dead. Gone. No confirmed kills. No massive firefights. Just silent disappearances. Varex studied the holographic tactical display in front of him. Small red icons marked Dominion squads. Blue markers represented human activity. What disturbed him most was how the blue markers moved. Human units never stayed in one place. They flowed across the battlefield like water, appearing wherever Dominion forces tried to regroup. Every time Varex attempted to reinforce one position, human soldiers were already waiting there. "How do they keep predicting us?" he demanded. A tactical analyst stepped forward nervously. "General, we believe the humans already know our doctrine." Varex turned slowly. "That is impossible." But the analyst activated another hologram. A massive archive of Dominion military formations appeared in the air. Standard assault patterns, flanking maneuvers, urban clearing tactics, orbital insertion strategies. Every doctrine the Dominion military had ever used. The analyst zoomed the display outward. Hundreds of simulations appeared surrounding the formations. Human training scenarios. Thousands of them. Varex stared in disbelief. "They've been studying us." The analyst nodded. "For decades." A transmission suddenly broke through the command channel. "General, this is Squad Omega." The signal was filled with static. "We tried 3 different advance routes. Humans were waiting at all of them." Gunfire echoed in the background. "They knew exactly where we would go." The transmission ended abruptly. Another officer spoke quietly. "General, they're not reacting to us." Varex frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're executing pre-planned responses." The officer expanded the hologram again. Human tactical movement patterns appeared over the battlefield. Each movement matched Dominion strategies almost perfectly. Varex slowly understood. The humans weren't adapting in real time. They were following rehearsed plans. Plans designed specifically to counter Dominion tactics. Which meant the humans had already predicted how this invasion would unfold. Long before the first Dominion ship arrived, Varex suddenly felt something he had never experienced in battle before. Uncertainty. The Dominion elite forces were the most powerful soldiers in the galaxy. Yet here on Earth, they were walking into traps that had been prepared years in advance. Every Dominion tactic had already been tested inside human simulations. Every strategy had already failed thousands of times in human training programs. And now the real invasion was simply repeating those simulations. Varex turned to one of the remaining Dominion commanders. "How many soldiers do we have left?" The officer checked the casualty board. "Less than 2,000, General." Varex felt the weight of the answer. More than half of the Dominion's greatest warriors had disappeared in only a few hours, and the humans had barely revealed any of their real military power. Another message arrived from the battlefield. A Dominion squad had captured a wounded human soldier during a brief skirmish. Varex ordered the prisoner brought to the command ship. Minutes later, the human stood in front of the Dominion officers. Despite being surrounded by heavily armed aliens, he looked strangely calm. Varex studied him carefully. "You prepared for this invasion," the general said. The human nodded. "Yes." Varex stepped closer. "For how long?" The human glanced toward the tactical map, showing the failing Dominion assault. Then he answered simply, "Since the first time your fleets entered our space." The Dominion officers exchanged uneasy glances. That had been nearly 40 years ago. The human continued quietly, "You've been planning this invasion for months." He looked directly at Varex. "We've been planning it for decades. For the first time since the invasion began." The Dominion commanders realized something terrifying. They had not invaded an unprepared world. They had entered a battlefield that humanity had been preparing for their entire lives. 12 hours after the Dominion invasion began, the battle for Earth was over. General Varex stood inside the command chamber of the last remaining Dominion dropship, staring at the tactical display that had once been filled with hundreds of friendly signals. Now only a handful remained. 5,000 elite Dominion soldiers had landed on Earth. Fewer than 200 were still active, and even those were surrounded. The silence on the battlefield was more terrifying than any gunfire. Human forces had stopped advancing. They were simply waiting. Varex slowly realized what that meant. The battle had never truly been a fight. It had been a demonstration. A quiet signal arrived on his console, an encrypted transmission from Earth Command. Varex hesitated for a moment before opening the channel. The hologram of a human officer appeared above the console. He wore the uniform of a high-ranking admiral. His expression was calm, almost respectful. "General Varex," the human said. The Dominion commander narrowed his eyes. "You know my name." The admiral nodded slightly. "We studied your campaigns, your strategies, your command patterns." Varex clenched his fists. "So this entire battle, you already knew how we would fight?" "Yes." The admiral didn't sound arrogant. If anything, he sounded almost apologetic. "You're proud of your soldiers," the human continued. "You should be. They fought well." Varex looked back at the tactical display. "Where are they?" "Safe." The answer came immediately. Varex blinked. "Safe." The admiral nodded. "We captured them." The Dominion commander stared at the human in disbelief. "You captured 5,000 elite soldiers?" "Yes." Varex struggled to process the statement. Capturing soldiers during battle was difficult enough. Capturing thousands of the galaxy's deadliest warriors should have been impossible. Yet the humans had done it. and according to the battlefield sensors, almost none of them had been killed. "You could have destroyed them," Varex said slowly. "Yes," the Admiral replied, "but we didn't need to." The Dominion commander stepped closer to the hologram. "Why?" The Admiral leaned back slightly in his chair. "Because destruction was never the point." The human officer activated another holographic display. Images appeared showing Dominion prisoners being escorted into large containment facilities. None of them were injured. None of them were mistreated. They looked confused more than anything else. "You wanted to understand our defenses," the Admiral said. "So we showed you." Varex shook his head. "You turned our invasion into a training exercise." The Admiral allowed himself a faint smile. "That's not entirely accurate." Varex frowned. "No." The human shook his head. "Training exercises are controlled." He gestured toward the battlefield data still visible on the Dominion console. This was a real test. Varex's eyes narrowed. "A test of what?" The Admiral's voice remained calm. "Whether the Dominion would choose conquest or cooperation." The Dominion commander stood silently for several seconds. Finally he asked the one question that mattered most. "What happens now?" The human Admiral folded his hands. "Now your soldiers go home." Varex looked up sharply. "You're releasing them?" "Yes." "Why?" The Admiral met his gaze. "Because war with humanity would cost the galaxy far more than victory is worth." The transmission began to fade. Before it ended, the human officer spoke one final sentence. "If the Dominion ever wishes to test humanity again." His calm voice carried a quiet confidence. "Send more soldiers. We're always looking for new training partners." The signal disappeared. Across the Dominion command network, silence spread. 5,000 elite warriors had entered human space. None had returned victorious, and humanity had defeated them without even calling it a war. Rocket.